Bowie Supercoach. I talked a few weeks ago on Sky News about the Victorian state budget that was handed down. Now, this is an area that generated a lot of messages to me, mainly from Victorians who were outraged by the amount of tax that has now been forced upon business via increasing payroll tax, and also to property investors by decreasing the land tax threshold from $350,000 down to $50,000. So the Victorian government are now telling the electorate that for the next 10 years, you need to be reminded about COVID. Why? Because we've got now a 10-year COVID levy, or a 10-year COVID tax, if you like, for basically the mistakes that the politicians made during the pandemic, primarily Dan Andrews. And let me tell you, some of the terminologies people were using when they were messaging me about Dan were not very favourable. The words like dictator and socialist were all thrown at me, and I was very interested to see what the sentiment was within Victoria, because they're the ones that are now going through this austerity measure, if you like, which is basically a definition for being taxed through the eyeballs. And I must be honest, I haven't seen this type of austerity since European national economies that were failing, or even South American national economies that were failing. And it's something that is very rare within Australia or even most developed countries. Now, it was very well publicised that Victoria was the most locked down state in Australia, but embarrassingly throughout the globe, it was also seen as having some of the most draconian measures throughout the entire world. So I empathise with my Victorian colleagues, and I don't think taxing businesses and taxing property investors is a great strategy. And if politicians made mistakes during the pandemic, and now the electorate and people live in Victoria have to be reminded about the pandemic for the next 10 years by paying a huge amount of tax, I think that that's a very disappointing outcome. And it's another reminder that if you go woke, you go broke. God bless and live with virtue.